I'm Shane. I'm a sales engineer at Jamf, and I've worked with organizations of all shapes and sizes over the years. Currently, I'm assigned to mostly commercial organizations in the Northern California area.
And hi, I'm Sean Rabbit, Senior Consulting Engineer for Identity and Access Management here at Jamf. Been working for Jamf for about 4 years now and 10 years at Apple before that. Great to have you all with us. Now, today's session is going to be focused mostly on macOS onboarding. There are similar things available for you for tvOS and iPadOS and iOS for automated onboarding, but they're not 100% a one-to-one replacement. I recommend checking out the different sessions here at JNUC for iOS onboarding if you're looking for more details there, but stick around. There's probably some stuff that you can take away from this session just for you.
Here's a brief agenda on what we plan to cover today. We'll start with why we think this matters. We'll highlight a number of the options that you have and some of those key differences. We'll focus in on considerations for success within each of those options. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the Jamf and tools to round out a macOS onboarding experience. So, why do we care? Well, most simply put, automated device enrollment is a vehicle for zero-touch enrollment of your devices. For your end users, it's as simple as step 1, open the box. Step 2, power on the device. There is no step 3. You can build automated device enrollment workflows that cater to your organization's needs, whether that's a great end user experience or automatically advancing through Setup Assistant for a kiosk type device, or even putting into place the framework for secure authentication, or maybe ultimately a zero trust deployment right out of the gate.
Now, you might be hearing that word zero trust at a bunch of other sessions here at JNUC this year. So if you'd like to learn more about how zero trust starts with zero touch, join session 1037 with Kat Garbus and myself. Hope to see you there.
Now, I know how much everyone loves acronyms, so here's a sneak peek at some of the ones we'll be using today. Automated device enrollment allows your organization to seamlessly enroll an MDM such as Jamf Pro. Enrollment customization allows you to further customize the automated enrollment experience. LDAP is a protocol standard for managing a directory of information about users and objects within an organization. A single sign-on allows an end user to log into multiple systems using the same ID. SAML is a protocol, specifically one that Jamf Pro uses for single sign-on. And lastly, MFA is when a secondary authentication source is required to grant a user access. That might be something like a one-time password. So let's take a look at some of the options we're going to discuss in greater detail today. We're going to break things down into different layers and talk about some of the key differences between those and some of the variations on those layers, and discuss why you might want one version over another, or potentially a combination of a few depending on the size and the needs of your organization.
You might see one crossed off of this list that has been very popular amongst organizations in the past. I'm going to cover my eyes and see if I can memorize it. CVE 2021-42287. Did I get it? I did. Yes. This is why you're not going to be binding to Active Directory anymore. This lovely QR code here brings you over to an article about how Active Directory binding broke this year again. And then it unbroke. So is the idea that is binding dead? Yes, binding is dead. Go read about it here, and don't bind your machines to Active Directory unless you have very, very specific use cases that are described in the WWDC sessions for the last 3 years, talking about managing Apple devices in organizations.
So let's start with a basic version of automated device enrollment and take a look at what that might get us. Here's a quick peek at some of the settings within Jamf Pro that could be configured. This is just using the default settings when you create a new automated enrollment workflow. In Jamf Pro, we specifically call that a prestage enrollment. We're requiring the MDM profile to be installed here, and unless you change that, the user could remove that. We'll see in some of our later versions or variants here why you might want to do that. In this workflow today, right now, nothing about the Setup Assistant is skipped, but that's absolutely something that could be done or could be adjusted depending on what you need. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like from the end user perspective. Here, an end user is prompted to choose their region and their language. When the device gets connected to the internet, if it's not already connected, the device will automatically come online, talk to Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager, and enroll into the MDM. This device is now enrolled into Jamf Pro, so the user was able to move forward with the default setup assistant options since we didn't make any changes to what they were going to see.
And for anybody who didn't catch all that stuff, feel free to rewind the video. No problem whatsoever. Now, plain Jane setup assistant means you don't really have a lot of control as a administrator right off the bat. And we're in IT, so we want control and security. So let's actually just work with that. We'll go off of security options. Generally, we can break this down left to right with less security on the left and more convenience, and the most security and the most options for an IT team to get you to a customized solution. So let's start breaking this down. Let's start with completely hands-free onboarding, no touchy at all. This could be a workflow that you'd use for a machine that gets wiped out often, like, say, shared desk or computer lab scenarios. Or if you want to get fancier, this could be there was a step 0 before there was no step 3 solution where, say, your new machines are touched by the IT team to get them into your MDM at least once before the machine is shipped. It's a common issue with people failing to connect their new machines to the internet, and all of a sudden they don't get MDM management. Gee. Now, at WWDC 2022 this year, Apple announced that a machine can be forced to connect to the internet for Setup Assistant after the first time it's ever been turned on and managed at least once. This may be a workflow for the justifiably paranoid of us who want to get a machine enrolled at least once before anyone sends out an erase call contents and settings command. Exceptionally useful should a machine ever go missing, and suddenly it sits at the Genius Bar at an Apple store, and what do you know? Now it suddenly has to be forced to connect to your MDM when it gets erased and wiped out. Now, your prestage is going to be pretty basic, and we'll tell the device to walk through all the setup assistant options by itself, skip the account creation. Your computer will need to be hardwired to the internet for this to work completely hands-free. So for laptops, you'll need a USB-C to Ethernet adapter for the modern systems. And you'll probably want to make a user account on the device with the Jamf Pro policy triggered on enrollment complete. And just to be safe, hit it with a reoccurring check-in trigger scoped to happen once per computer to make that user account. Now, ain't nobody got time to watch the whole video again, so we're running this again in 4 times speed. But in this scenario, no one has touched anything on the box up until that point right there where the user has to log in. Someone does need to log in at least once, but once you get logged in, then you can go into system preferences and set it up for automatic login. Now, unless you want kiosk mode, or unless you want that nice pre-stage to frustrate anyone who steals one of your computers, automated device enrollment just by itself isn't the greatest. So let's actually just cut that one out. Let's move on to LDAP authentication. Shane?
Thanks, Sean. Now let's take a look at a workflow that requires the end user to first authenticate from a source of truth. As Sean mentioned, we'll look at this using LDAP. Again, some of the options available from Jamf Pro when setting up this workflow. Here, we've customized the message the user will see during authentication. We've also opted to skip a large number of the setup assistant options so that when the device enrolls into Jamf Pro, the user doesn't have to do a lot of configuration on their end. We're also going to pre-fill the username here based on the full name and the username that's going to be passed on from the directory. Another look from the end user's perspective. Just like before, the user connects to the internet after choosing their language and region. Here, they're greeted with their customized message. They are prompted to enter their work credentials. Upon the successful authentication, they were able to have their pre-filled full name and username, simply enter their password and continue.
But Shane, I didn't see any MFA methods inside there. We need more security.
Good point, Sean. Now, let's take a look at some of the options that would allow for more security, such as multi-factor authentication during the initial enrollment. To get even more security during the initial authentication, we'll need to look at something like single sign-on or Jamf Connect, or possibly even a combination of the two. These would allow for multi-factor authentication during onboarding. Jamf Pro relies on SAML to support single sign-on. One immediate advantage of this over an authentication against something like LDAP is that we probably don't need to worry about any additional setup or infrastructure to securely connect to an outdated on-premises tool. We can simply configure Jamf Pro to talk to the cloud-hosted identity provider.
Now, you might have seen at WWDC announcement about adding support for OAuth 2 login to MDMs. But OAuth 2 is just another way to authenticate to a server, and SAML really gets us what we need. We don't really need to renew a token or access the server beyond this point. So SAML gets us immediate authorization and authentication.
So another screenshot of some of the settings within Jamf Pro. The big change here is that we don't need to set a customized message for the end user. We're going to rely on the cloud-hosted identity provider for that. We're also going to lock the end user's information during this workflow, so that can't be changed during enrollment. Here, we're going to use Google as the identity provider, and we're also going to require the user have that multi-factor authentication prompt. So let's take a look at the end user's experience during this onboarding workflow. Here we can see the user hitting the single sign-on pane against Google. They're entering in their password, which was successful. They got the one-time password or the multi-factor prompt, and then they were able to continue. Their credentials are locked. They need to create their password, and we're off to the races just like we've seen before.
Just a note too on that last video, if you noticed, the user was prompted to type in their password when they did a authentication with single sign-on. That's because our SAML token can't actually pass that password information along to the macOS creation and setup assistant like an LDAP server can. They do a little bit of a scrape on that window in order to get the user's password and be able to lock it in. Now, if we do want to lock that password in, welcome to every conversation of my life for the last 3 years. Seriously, ask my husband. I'm pretty sure I've talked about Jamf Connect to pretty much everybody at the random local bar, and I'm in a small town. Anyway, Jamf Connect does 3 things. It makes local user accounts based on the credentials of a cloud identity provider. It allows centralized management of administrator rights. And it keeps local user account passwords in sync with a cloud identity provider. Now, there is other magic in there like Jamf Unlock and Kerberos and things like that, but let's keep it simple for now. It does not require a Jamf Infrastructure Manager. It does not require an LDAP server. It just uses a cloud identity provider, so that way an account can be created anywhere where there is an internet connection. Now, big part here is we're actually going to be installing a separate package onto the computer as part of the prestage. That's going to be Jamf Connect and potentially your branding images, so that way you get a fancy logo and background. When that device gets enrolled, we will actually push down the configuration profiles for Jamf Connect, and we're going to push down the Jamf Connect installer package right away. Your user account will actually be skipped and created on demand by Jamf Connect itself. And you'll have a user short name based on your identity provider credentials and a password that matches your identity provider password. If you use an identity provider that is based on OIDC, OpenID Connect, your usernames are probably going to be in the format of an email address. So we'll actually scrape the beginning off of that email address there. If it's sean.rabbit@jamf, your username, short name on that machine will become sean.rabbit. And a user was able to log in with that short name, or they could log in with their full email address if they were offline, for example. So remember that kiosk mode workflow from before? Well, watch what happens when we add Jamf Connect into the loop. Now we have a super automated onboarding workflow, but we have the security of people not being able to get into the computer until they log in with their cloud identity provider credentials. There's literally no user account on the machine until that point. And we can use our cloud identity provider to determine if that user should become a standard account or an admin account. Centralized privilege management with no more tools required than your IDP is kind of a nice thing because a lot of people make you pay for that type of service. Lastly, we can also enable File Vault immediately when the user account is created. That means you could send out a computer that has been enrolled in your MDM server, no user account is on it, shut down the computer, pop it in the box, ship it, and then the user account gets created when the user first touches that machine. Now we can actually customize this experience even further with Jamf Pro and some enrollment customization screens to guide the user through onboarding and to make Jamf Connect the very first user account. With this method, we can combine the security of single sign-on with the convenience of a password and account creation. Now, we'll tell our prestage to still install Jamf Connect and its settings, and we'll display a fully customized onboarding experience with an enrollment customization before the device actually gets enrolled in the Jamf Pro server. We'll prompt the user for their username and password there when they're first enrolling, which allows you to keep people out of your Jamf Pro server with multi-factor authentication and single sign-on. And then we'll simply prompt the user for their password one last time to make the user account just in time on the box. Remember, SAML cannot pass a password. Now, once the user logs into the Jamf Pro server, right here, Jamf Pro will pass some of those user SAML attributes over to Jamf Connect on the client machine with a config profile. The first user account that's created is going to be locked to that username. And that person is going to be set up in Jamf Pro with that as the owner of the machine. We simply needed the user to type their password one more time so we can make a local user account. After that, we can hold the user in the setup assistant using the notify mechanism of Jamf Connect until Jamf Pro is done doing some critical installation of software in the machine. Things like, say, an endpoint protection software. I wonder if there's a company that makes that. Wow, it was that Jamf Protect program. Check out other sessions available for more information. But if we wanted to be able to put things on there like network access tools like Jamf Trust and Jamf Protect, all of that can be installed on the machine before the user's actually allowed to interact with it. Also, as you can see here, we turned on File Vault without a reboot. That way you can guarantee full disk encryption for all of you justifiably paranoid security folks out there.
Thanks for all that information, Sean. This is a bit of a busy slide, but the big takeaway here is that the further right we go, the more options that we have available. As Sean mentioned before, more organizations are interested in personalizing or customizing that onboarding workflow for new employees, or more importantly, ensuring that the proper end user permissions are established. Today, organizations are looking for a centralized way to do that account management, sometimes referred to as a privileged access management or PAM tool. With Jamf Connect, we're able to provide the foundation for this based on that group membership.
Remember, you can use your existing identity provider to not spend any more money on those third-party tools out there. Jamf Connect is going to read a role or group membership, which can be used to assign to either an individual user or a group of users to decide who gets standard rights and who gets administrator rights. So in many organizations, for example, if you're following CIS guidelines, most users should become a standard user. And then maybe you need to privilege escalate them with another tool, say like Jamf Self-Service or that wonderful SAP Enterprise Privileges application. But then members of the IT team, because they need to do the needful, will become administrators instantly. Or maybe all students become standard users and all administrators and faculty members become admins. It can all be managed in a single location. Lastly, let's talk about account creation and that onboarding experience. With all the other methods, automated device enrollment, or if you gate your access to the server with LDAP and single sign-on, we do have some basics available to you with the enrollment customization option. This is happening before the device is actually enrolled in the MDM, and you can put things up there with messages and instructions for your end user. Kind of nice. But with Jamf Connect, we're able to use both tools. We can actually use the Jamf Connect notify mechanism, and we can use the enrollment customization onboarding experience to really give a beautiful branded message to the user explaining what exactly is happening to their brand new beautiful Mac. Now, Jamf Connect is not just the only tool out there for onboarding, although I personally think it's the best one. I might be biased. There are additional tools available for you if you're in an older system. Say, for example, if you are on an on-premises Active Directory environment, you do not have a cloud available to you. Cloud Identity Provider is the modern system. If you're on premises and you are able to talk to your domain controller, Nomad Login is another option. Nomad is an open source tool available from Jamf. It is on our GitHub page, and it does very similar things to what Jamf Connect does, just it must talk to an on-premises AD. So that means if you're doing a zero-touch type of onboarding, you're going to be doing zero-touch, but someone's got to drive in beyond your network first. Another tool that's available is a larger version of the notify mechanism available in Jamf Connect, and that's called DEP Notify. This is a very powerful tool. We actually have done other sessions at JNUC about DEP Notify, including a security session on how to remediate security events with Katie and myself and last year. You might want to check that one out. But DEP Notify allows you to interact with the computer and actually run scripts or run policies. So, for example, you might want to combine your onboarding experience with Jamf Connect login just to do the basics. So that way it installs the essential software. But then DEP Notify could trigger and then say, hey, who are we assigning? Which site are we assigning this to? Or would you like a small, medium, or large installation of software? Internally here at Jamf, Dr. K has set up a beautiful onboarding experience using exactly that. We go Jamf Connect first, and then we use DEP Notify second. If you'd like to see a lot of those onboarding scripts, they are available to you on our GitHub as well. So jamf.com/GitHub has the DEP Notify starter script. And it's a very powerful script written by a professional services team here that can actually trigger multiple actions in your Jamf Pro server, depending on what the user's input is. And then, of course, the best tool that you have is the experience of some of the most generous and wonderful folks out there, the people who belong to the Jamf Nation group, as well as your Mac admin Slack. I have never seen a more generous group of people out there who are willing to help out. Now, with that onboarding enrollment customization there, everything is written very simply, and it's actually just written in Markdown. And you can do very customized things like being able to link in YouTube videos or adding graphics or other things that are available on the internet. If you've never used Markdown before, a great cheat sheet is available up on GitHub. The GitHub Enterprise cheat sheet is actually the exact same way that you would write the README files on GitHub, which is nice. So you might even be used to it already and being able to use that markup language. But this is a great little quickie guide there with this QR code that shows you exactly what you need to do to write your own markup. Last bit of excitement here, the Jamf Connect Notify screen. If you notice at the beginning of one of these videos here, we had the lovely Wom Wom bar, as I lovingly call it there, as well as some customization that comes up. All of these pieces are things that you can customize yourself, like putting in a different icon, title, description, status bar message, that little determinant bar at the bottom there that's going back and forth. All of that can be modified. Most importantly, all it really is doing is just listening to changes to a file. So, for example, right there where that triggered, we started up a brand new Jamf Pro policy, which just simply wrote, hey, update this file to say we're installing Jamf Protect. There is a starter script for this too available on my GitHub that you can actually just add to your policies and have it write to that file automatically. That's github.com/Sean, SEAN, -rabbit, RABBITT. Notice that's Sean spelled the right way.
So we've covered a lot of topics today. We started with why you should care about all of this onboarding workflows in general. We talked about several different options and discussed a lot of the differences of those options. We've been focusing more recently on how you can plan for success and a lot of the additional tools that would be at your disposal when it comes to rounding out a great onboarding experience for your end users. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming, and we hope to see you more at the rest of JNUC 2022.